I remember that day vividly, not because anything catastrophic happened, but because it was quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps into your bones when you're alone in a crowded room. I was living in a studio apartment where the walls were thin, and the water ran cold more often than hot. It wasn't much, but it was all I could afford. Rent ate up half my paycheck. The other half went to bills, bus fare, and a stale loaf of bread that had to last the week. I was 24. Most people my age were planning weekend getaways, buying new clothes, posting smiling selfies at brunches. Me, I was walking past real estate windows every morning, pausing to stare at the glossy brochures with beautiful brick houses and the word sold stamped across them in bold red letters. That's when the idea planted itself, quiet, stubborn, and unmoving. One day, that sold sign will be mine. So I started saving. Every single coin, every single dollar. I worked mornings at a bakery that smelled like heaven, but paid like hell. I worked evenings cleaning an office where no one ever looked me in the eye. I tutored kids on weekends, sold my paintings on Etsy, and took freelance day to entry gigs that kept me up past midnight. My friends would ask me to go out, and I always said no. I'm saving, I'd say, and they'd roll their eyes. Saving for what? They didn't get it. Not really to them. A house was just walls and a roof. To me, it was safety. Permanence, it was a promise to myself that I wouldn't always feel like I was surviving day by day. The first year was the hardest. Every cent I saved felt like a drop in a bottomless ocean. I clipped coupons, skipped coffee shops, mended clothes instead of buying new ones. My phone was 2 models behind and my shoes had been resoled twice. But every time I looked at my bank account and saw the number grow, even if it was just by $10, it felt like a tiny victory. Year 2, I moved in with a roommate to cut rent. The apartment was loud, messy, and full of someone else's bad habits. But I stayed. I cooked at home. I walked instead of Ubering. I watched YouTube videos instead of Netflix. By year 3, I was burnt out. There were nights I sat in my car after work and cried ugly, exhausted tears that no one saw. I was losing time. While others were falling in love, starting families, traveling, I was working myself raw for a dream that sometimes felt imaginary. But I kept going, because in my mind, I could already see it. My dream home, a small white house with a red front door. A garden out front, even if I had to plant it myself. Wooden floors that creaked in the right places. A fireplace, a reading nook. A kitchen with enough space for 2 people to cook side by side. And most importantly, space for them. My family, I imagined them walking in on a warm afternoon, laughing at the smell of Mom's lentil soup bubbling on the stove. I pictured my dad fixing something that didn't need fixing. My sister's kids running through the backyard, screaming with joy. I dreamed of finally being able to say, I made it, and I made this for all of us. Years 4 to 6 passed in a blur. The savings became more substantial. I took a better, paying job in a tech company after finishing an online course. I still lived modestly, still clipped coupons, still cooked at home, but for the first time I could breathe. I started house hunting in year 7. At first, I was nervous. Every viewing felt like walking through someone else's dream. Too big, too sterile, too expensive. But then, one day, I walked into her. My house, she wasn't perfect. Peeling paint, rusted pipes, and a creaky porch, but she had soul. A little backyard where I could plant those lavender bushes I'd always imagined. A kitchen window that caught the sunset just right. A staircase that curved like it was made to be photographed. I signed the papers with trembling hands. I cried the first night I walked in with the keys. There was no furniture, no curtains, no Wi-Fi. Just me, a folding chair, and a cheap bottle of wine. But I was home. Over the next few months, I made it mine. I painted the walls in warm, earthy tones. I found furniture at thrift stores, sanded it down, and gave it new life. I built bookshelves. I planted herbs. I hung fairy lights on the porch. Every detail I designed with one thing in mind, the housewarming. The celebration, the moment I had waited for all these years. I imagined my mom's face lighting up when she saw the kitchen. My dad sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. My siblings eating too much, talking too loud. bringing life into the space I had filled with so much silence. I planned it down to the last napkin. I sent out invitations a month in advance, called each person, followed up with texts, made sure they knew this mattered to me. I even saved up again, just enough to throw a proper feast. I spent days prepping, cooking from scratch, cleaning every inch of the house until it gleamed. That morning I woke up early. I opened every curtain, let the sunlight flood in. I lit candles. I played our favorite songs. I laid out the food, still warm and fragrant. I set out extra chairs, just in case someone brought a friend. I looked around the house and thought, this is it. This is what it was all for. I put on the dress I had been saving for this day, the one I hadn't worn in years. I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, you did it. Then I waited, clock ticking, sun shining. Table set, heart open, I waited. The day of the housewarming arrived like a soft spring morning, bright, promising, full of hope. I woke up early, the sunlight spilling through the curtains like a gentle promise. I had planned everything meticulously. The table was set with my grandmother's embroidered cloth, the silverware polished until it gleamed, and every dish was my family's favorite. The kitchen smelled of roasted chicken, fresh herbs, and cinnamon from the apple pie, cooling on the windowsill. The refrigerator hummed quietly, the only sound in the stillness. I put on my best dress, the one I had saved for special occasions, the one that hugged my frame just right and made me feel like I belonged in this new chapter. I glanced around the house one last time, my heart swelling with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward for 7 long years. The first guests were supposed to arrive at 4 p.m. At 3:45, I stood by the door, the sound of the front gate opening ringing like a bell in my ears, but no one came. At 4 p.m., I checked my phone, half expecting a flurry of texts or calls. Nothing. 5 p.m. rolled by, and my stomach twisted in knots. The food sat untouched, slowly cooling. Plates arranged perfectly as if waiting for a family that had somehow gotten lost on the way. I told myself, they'll come, they have to come. At 6 p.m., my phone finally buzzed. It was my sister. Hey, sorry, we're at Tanya's baby shower. Totally slipped my mind. Slipped your mind. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. They had chosen someone else's celebration over mine. My throat tightened, the warmth of the day suddenly turning cold and sharp. I tried calling my parents, no answer, texts ignored. I sat alone in the middle of the room, the silence swallowing me whole. I looked around the house. My house, the house I had dreamed about for years. The house I had saved for, fought for, sacrificed for. Empty the once bright kitchen was now a reminder of absence. I poured myself a glass of wine, but the bitterness was nothing compared to the ache inside. I kept refreshing my phone, hoping for a change, for a miracle, but none came. The following days were worse. When I finally reached my mother, her voice was distracted and apologetic. We just thought you knew. We didn't mean to hurt you. But the truth wasn't in her words. It was in the silence that followed. They never wanted to come. They never made the house a home for me. I realized then that I had been building a dream for ghosts. And in that moment, something inside me broke, but also hardened. The days after that silent, empty housewarming stretched out like a desert, endless, dry, and desolate. At first, I thought grief would consume me, like a storm that wouldn't pass. I thought I'd be broken forever, tethered to the hurt of being forgotten by the people I loved most. But grief, I learned, is a strange thing. It doesn't always shatter you. Sometimes it steals you. I began to see the house differently. It wasn't just a building. It was a monument to my strength, a symbol of every late night, every sacrifice, every lonely moment I had endured. And suddenly, it wasn't theirs to ruin. I painted the guest room a soothing sage green. Instead of waiting for their footsteps, I filled it with books that whispered new stories into my life. The pages became my company, the ink my comfort. I strung up fairy lights across the balcony, turning it into my sanctuary. Nights were no longer about loneliness, but about quiet celebrations with just me, the stars, and a glass of wine. I started inviting people who chose me, friends who didn't need an invitation to care, neighbors who brought laughter instead of judgment, strangers who became confidants. Dinner parties bloomed in my home, not out of obligation, but out of genuine joy. The rooms echoed with music, with stories, with new memories being stitched into the fabric of the walls. The absence of my family faded into the background noise of a life rebuilt. I traveled too. I found new horizons, new cultures, and a vastness that reminded me how small and how vast my own life was at the same time. Every trip was a reclaiming of myself, my time, my spirit, my joy. Then, inevitably, the phone calls came. "Your house looks incredible. We're sorry we missed your party. We'd love to come visit sometime." I listened, but I didn't rush to answer. I wasn't bitter, but I was no longer desperate for their approval. When they asked if they could visit, I was honest. This housewarming was for the people who were here when it mattered. I told them gently, "I hope you understand. The sweetest revenge wasn't to hurt them, but to show them they missed out on me, my time, my heart, my home. It was to live a life so full, so vibrant, so unapologetically mine, that their absence became their own loss." From my balcony, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not just peace with the house, but peace with myself. I was finally home,